Sometimes a game is just so odd it ends up catching your eye, and that's exactly what happened with me with Kitty Powers Matchmaker, now out on the PS4. But is this game like finding your true love, or is it like a really bad one-night stand? In the game, you're playing as, well, a matchmaker for Kitty Powers Matchmaking service. You start off by creating your avatar of your character, have a few base traits for them. In fact, your avatar can then show up in your friends and other people on PSN's game, though it does change your name, so you don't have to worry about your name getting out there, I guess. But once you do, you're then given kind of a tutorial about how to, well, match people up. After the initial tutorial, you're then given the free reign to start making matches on your own. You'll have a client come to you, and then you have a book filled with potential dates, and then you match them up and hope for the best. Every one of the characters you're going to be dealing with, clients and potential dates, fall into one of 10 different categories, like hipster or geek or edgy types. Well, it may be easy to pair two of a similar type together, and you'll only have one type to start off with. Basically, the game has a kind of map with different clubs that people hang out with, and you get to decide where you want to put posters for the dating service. You start off by putting them only at one place, and then as you progress, you'll put them at more places, so more types of potential dates will start coming your way. After you pair two people up, it's then time to pick where they're going to be going, and this is done with like envelopes with the different restaurants inside of them, and it mixes up, and then you pick one, and whichever one you end up picking is the place they're going to go on that date. You unlock more potential restaurants, which have harder things to them, such as harder mini-games and harder to please different clientele that end up going to those restaurants as you progress. Of course, a restaurant with a higher difficulty will end up netting you better rewards in the end, but you start off with a few easy ones to get you started. When the date begins, you're in the ear of your client, giving them advice throughout the course of the date, picking the topics, whether or not they should lie or not, and of course doing the various mini-games that you'll have to do as the date goes on. You start off by ordering food, and you make chit-chat using a slot machine that gives you 3 potential choices for a category. You then decide which of the 3 are there that you want to do, or you can nudge the slot machine wheel to pick a topic that is right above or right below whatever one you currently have selected. Of course, this really only ends up mattering if you end up duplicating topics as dates go on. Clients can go on multiple dates sometimes in order to fully become compatible, so you have to keep track of what you've already talked about on previous dates or even during the same date to make sure that you don't end up asking the same thing. Besides the slot machine for picking topics, there are other minigames you'll be dealing with, such as the Wheel of Misfortune. If you decide that your client should lie on a particular part of the date, you'll then have to roll the wheel to whether or not the date ends up accepting the lie or not. This is randomly generated with check marks and X's, with the same amount of X's and check marks every time you end up spinning it, so it's basically a 50-50 shot of what it's going to end up landing on, and sometimes you can get a little bit of extra coinage while spinning the wheel, so there's a little added incentive sometimes to lie. Plus, of course, you'll end up increasing the affection between the potential datees when doing so as well. Along with them, you'll also have stuff like memorizing the desserts on the dessert tray. Basically, the dessert tray goes by with 4 different desserts, and you have to remember not only what was on there, but in what order, because your date will then say what they ended up wanting, so you have to remember which one was dessert number 3. You'll also have to sometimes bring up a memory from your past, like an interesting story. So you have a match the symbol little minigame with clouds, and you have to match up a pair of symbols within 3 turns. Then there's the really hilarious farting minigame, which is kind of like the old game show Card Sharks, where you have a card placed down and you have to say whether or not the card is higher or lower, and you have to get a certain number of these in a row right, or else you end up farting in front of your date. Thankfully, you can still lie about it and try to pass it off that someone else did it, but of course, there's still that 50-50 shot that they will end up knowing that you passed gas. Every time you send a client on a date, though, it's going to be potentially a little bit different than the previous date that you just ended up having beforehand. The minigames change up, and the flow of the date can change up. Sometimes you're going to have to deal with remembering what you should tip the waiter. The next time, you may have to deal with the date going into the bathroom, changing something about themselves, and you have to memorize what they ended up changing when they come back. This at least keeps things a bit fresh, but also has to keep you on your toes and paying attention in order to make sure you don't miss anything. Basically, this game is a giant version of memory from start to finish. If you're able to make it through the end of the date, which means not making 3 mistakes during the course of the day, basically 3 strikes and you're out, such as getting caught lying or failing at a few of the different things or bringing up the same topic of conversation in the dates, you'll then go to kind of the taxi where you decide whether or not you want the clients to go on another date. If the client and the person they're dating are both really happy with one another, you can suggest that they go and fully become a couple, in which case then they become a happy couple and you get rewarded for getting that client hooked up with someone. Other times they just want to remain friends, in which case it's all off, in which case you'll then have to match that client up with a different person. And then sometimes you just pick the middle option where they want to see them again, in which case you'll then repeat that kind of date with that same client and that same potential date, and you can do this multiple times until either they finally decide they don't want to be together or finally can get them together. For having a successful date, you will earn coins that you can then spend not only during the dates itself in order to ask the waiter about certain food dishes. Basically, at the beginning of a date, the date says what they want, and they'd be like, I want a cold chicken dish. And then you get the potential options. So then you have to go through, and if you don't know what something is, you can ask the waiter for 20 coins what a particular item is to make sure you don't end up picking something that's a spicy piece of ham or something like that. You can also spend the money in the shop in order to get more restaurants that could potentially be gone to during the course of dates, as well as a few other things that you can buy, such as more pages in the date book for more potential dates for your clients. Also, for successfully completing dates, you will earn experience and level up your character, making the agency a bit bigger, dealing with more clients, and more potential other things thrown into the mix, such as more knowledge ahead of time. You'll basically get the option every few levels to pick a topic that you'll then find out about a client when they meet with you, and that can become a potential topic during the course of a date, such as what is their social level, are they an introvert or an extrovert, or whether or not they prefer to drive a car until it breaks down or get it regularly fixed up. These are just little extras that end up adding to potential topics during date, and they really end up coming in handy as you level up and progress. The thing in this game, though, is it's just a fun, potentially addictive experience that doesn't really have an endpoint. Your goal is just to see how many dates you can potentially get people to go on. After you match up couples, every so often you'll get a letter from them in the mail that says whether or not they've broken it off, or whether or not they're still together, then potentially getting married, and even potentially having kids. And this all adds to your reputation. From the technical side of things, Kitty Powers Matchmaker ran perfectly fine. I didn't run into any major glitching or crashing of any sort. Kitty Powers Matchmaker is available on the PlayStation 4 for $9.99, and it does feature a full trophy list, including a platinum. It's going to involve you, of course, learning about every single one of the dishes at every single restaurant and matching up a whole ton of potential couples. So it'll take a little bit of time and grinding if you're going to want to see the platinum, but since the game is pretty much a never-ending game, it's relatively on the easy scale. In the end, this game is pretty strange, very campy, made me laugh a few times, and strangely addictive. I found myself wanting to potentially just get the next date going after playing for a couple of hours. I was still into it. In fact, I had to kind of pull myself away in order to get this review done. It's the kind of game that really shouldn't be that fun, but ends up being enjoyable. So with everything said, I'm going to be giving Kitty Powers Matchmaker a 7 out of 10. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.